Now, one of the biggest challenges that we face in life is difficult conversations. In general, we can have great conversations. We're quite happy to congratulate people. We're quite happy to have those fun and engaging conversations. But when it comes to those challenging ones, those uncomfortable ones, maybe even those courageous ones, we tend to shy away from it and we tend to take a step back. And as we know, and I'm sure you've been in situations where sometimes what started off as a molehill turns into a big mountain of a problem when they are left alone or even avoided. Now, if we focus a little bit more on thinking about corporate difficult conversations, they could be things like delivering tough feedback to employees or clients. It could even be resetting expectations, maybe addressing behaviors or substandard performance, or even clarifying misunderstandings or accusations. But if you have avoided a difficult conversation in your life, you're not alone, as over 70%, according to Bravely, have indicated that people in the workplace have avoided a difficult conversation at some point in their life. Now, I would probably challenge that statistic and think it might even be higher than that, because I know I've been in situations myself where there are difficult conversations and you're just like, if I leave it alone, it'll just go away. And no, more times than often, we know that is, or it may not be the best case and can actually create more issues than we thought in the long term. So what I'd love you to do, I want you to pop into the chat, because for those who are new, we do try and make this as interactive as possible. I would love you to pop into the chat. What is an example of a difficult conversation you have faced in the workplace and you may have hesitated or potentially even avoided? Just maybe 1, 2, 3 words. Just pop it in the chat. What types of difficult conversations have you avoided in the workplace previously? If you're a solopreneur, okay, there we go. Disagreement with reporting manager. Great. Disagreements. They're always, especially when it's a manager, right? You're a bit cautious on whether it's going to affect your employment or maybe a potential promotion. So we tend to shy away. Who else has faced, what other difficult conversations have we faced in the workplace? Pop them in the chat. That was a really good first one there. Looks disagreeing with clients. Okay, they're always a bit challenging too, because you don't want to ruin that relationship and lose a client. Sonia, giving staff feedback you know they will get defensive about. Okay, so understanding how can we separate the problem from the person when it comes to challenging feedback that people may get defensive about. So we may touch a little bit on that today. Sid, communicating an adverse decision to a customer and dealing with their reaction. Oh, that's a tough one, especially when it's not your decision. Can be a little bit touchy. These are great. But I'm going to, let's look at maybe some courageous conversations that we might have with staff. So I'm going to take you through a couple, and we're just going to focus more on staff here. But however, these could also be for clients that we deal with or employees. So let's take a look at these. Okay, so we can have behavior correction. So this has popped up so far. Could be performance issues, growth opportunities. But these next two are probably a little bit less commonly asked, but are probably really important. One is everything okay? Yeah, at times we may hear someone say something, or we may see them do something, and we tend to react or maybe respond to the behavior or what's actually happened, versus actually going, you know what? Is this behavior out of the norm? And maybe we need to have a conversation to see if this person's actually okay. And I've done this quite a few times where I've actually checked in with the person before even considering the conversation. But this one here, asking, how can I do better for you? And this is one that managers or leaders really ask, but is super important. and it's a courageous conversation. It can feel a bit difficult because you're now going to receive feedback from your employees or maybe even your clients or suppliers. And that is, how can I do better for you? It's a really, really important question. And my challenge to all of you here is to think about how can you ask a similar question more often. Now, when it comes to difficult conversations, we have three variables we've really got to take into consideration when we're dealing with these different conversations. So first one is direction. Is the conversation up, down, or external? So up would be to senior management, leadership, maybe even board level. Down is to the team that maybe you manage, or even those that you don't. So it could be more with those around you. And external could be to a supplier, maybe a franchisee, etc. But then the second thing we've also got to take into consideration is who initiates it. Are you the person who's going to initiate the conversation, or has someone else initiated and you're now the receiver of a difficult conversation? And the third one is, what type of group are we in? Is it one-to-one, where we've got just two people in the room or on a call? Or are we now going one to a small group, or are we now going one to a large group? And we have to take this into consideration when we're thinking about how we approach difficult conversations. Now, today, we're not going to delve into these because we only have about 25 to 30 minutes with you. And so I want to focus on a couple of key areas. First of all, in the chat, I'd love you to pop in there, why are honest conversations so difficult? Pop them in the chat. Why, for you, are honest conversations so difficult? And thanks, Tony. Staff misunderstanding the limit of their accountability, think they have more authority than intended. Okay, that's good. That was in response to the earlier question. So this one is, why are honest conversations so difficult? Not wanting to hurt the person. And I think that's why a lot of people tend to avoid them, is they don't want to affect the relationship or affect someone's emotions. It's really good. Thanks, Anel. Who else can share with us, why do they think honest conversations are so difficult? Trying to work out if, Antonio, trying to work out if people have hidden agendas. Okay, could be. Uncomfortable being either parties are neurodivergent. Okay, it's a good consideration. Kara, can be challenging if we are aware there are other personal situations impacting a person, but still need to address behaviors. Great. Tio, by the way, you just sent me a direct message. The person may misinterpret or retaliate in some way. Yeah, we're always kind of a little bit concerned about whether that could offend someone. But one of the biggest reasons why we avoid these conversations is we actually put our own comfort level first. Human beings love comfort. And the reason why we tend to avoid really important conversations that matter and need to happen, what could be a difficult and uncomfortable, maybe a courageous conversation, is we put our own comfort level first. So I want you to think about a shift here where, especially when we're thinking about growth, difficult conversations, and maybe behavior, or there could be feedback involved, I want you to consider the shift here, which is really important. And that is to put the team or the clients or the individual's growth and well-being before your own comfort zone, your own comfort level. And this is a real key. We've got to be able to make that shift. We love sitting in the comfort, but unfortunately, to have the conversations that matter, to clear the air, to make sure that we don't get stuck in our own perspective and maybe that building on its own, or allowing behavior to maybe affect the whole team or that person's performance, we've got to put our team's growth and well-being and individuals or external clients' growth and well-being first before our own comfort level. And that can be challenging. But if we think about why honest conversations are so difficult in a way, There is no safety, so people don't feel that psychological safety. Secondly, they feel like they may have no permission to speak up. And thirdly, there is no roadmap. And this will be new for many of you. And we're going to dive deep into a roadmap for conversations. But before we do that, I want you to make a shift. We're going to make a shift today because one of the big reasons why these conversations are difficult is maybe the language. Now, if we keep saying they're difficult or they have to be courageous or they are uncomfortable, our brain is automatically going to go, whoa, I don't feel comfortable here. So it's going to take a step back. So maybe if we shift that terminology to having honest conversations, we may now actually start making greater traction in regards to having the conversations that matter. So this, if you're working inside a corporate environment and you're a leadership point of view or a manager, then you want to start shifting your language to how can we have the honest conversations? This is really key. So we're going to shift from difficult, uncomfortable, courageous to now using terminology like honest conversations. Now, I spoke about there that why they're so difficult is that we have people feel no safety, whether you're the initiator or the receiver, no permission, either side, and no roadmap. So let's have a look at when we're thinking about normalizing on honest conversations or having more regular honest conversations, how we can do that in a way where people have a roadmap. So let's take a look at how we can build a roadmap for honest conversations. So the first part here that we look at is say what you mean. And it's really important. We need to be able to say what you mean what you say, and everything that needs to be said is actually said. So quite often we can be in these conversations and we tend to dance around the topic, or we tend to waffle a little bit before we get into it. So we need to actually say exactly what we mean rather than maybe dancing around the topic. We have to mean what you say. So you can't just hesitate when you go to say it, or you can't half-heartedly share it. You've got to make sure that if you're going to have that honest conversation, that you mean what you say, and that ensure that everything that needs to be said is actually said from both sides. So we've got to be able to create that space where this happens. How do we do that? So let's have a look first at how we normalize honest conversations in a group, in a company, maybe your team, maybe with your clients. How do we create these? So first, we need to have them frequent. Whenever they're needed, not just when there's a problem. So we need to start building in honest conversations. And by the way, honest conversations are not just when there's problems. It's also honest conversations when someone's doing something really well. And we tend to forget this. We tend to praise people. We tend to forget to acknowledge great things that are done really, really well, especially if someone is doing a good job all the time. We need to still make sure we acknowledge them. So honest conversations frequently, not only when there are problems. So how do we give feedback that is maybe something they're doing well, but also things they can improve? Okay, safe is number 2 here. We need to respect for all and ensure there are no repercussions ever. All right, so quite often we see people and they will give feedback, but they'll put it in a way that, okay, you're now going to lose your job or etc. But we've got to create a space where that there's respect for all. Now, the interesting one about repercussions, right? Now, if someone is now, if they're repeating behaviors, of course, you then need to have a performance review, etc., and have those performance conversations. And there may be a point where you have to be in a position where either they need a change in role, or maybe they may even be dismissed. Now, that's in certain situations, but in most cases, we want to try and avoid repercussions. It's more about how do we help people grow, evolve, and the relationship prosper by having the honest conversations. Number 3 here, they need to be familiar. If we're going to normalize honest conversations within a group situation or company, we need to have familiarity. So what are the standard format that everyone understands? And that could be around, what is the approach to an honest conversation? If we hear the word, I'm going to give you feedback, for many people, that's a red flag, and they go on the defensive as though, oh, I'm in trouble. So we need to think about how can we even create that space around, okay, what is our terminology? And we will talk about that shortly. And the fourth one is here, universal. Now that means everyone in that group, everyone in that relationship, everyone in that company needs to play. If you're going to normalize it and people to actually have regular, honest conversations. And it starts from the top right through to the bottom. It needs to be everyone involved. Now, what's interesting is we need to understand that high-performing teams have more honest conversations than good or low-performing teams. And the key to when we think about high-performing teams is that they will have, they'll share feedback, or they'll have that honest conversation promptly and quickly. So they don't delay, or sometimes you need a bit of context, you need a little bit of space, but they don't delay it too long, so it's promptly, and then they keep it quick. They don't waffle on, they don't take too long, they get to the heart of the matter quickly, because they know that if they avoid them or delay them, then that is actually going to cost the organization or the team from being able to achieve their goals. It will be a distraction. So they understand that. Now, that's really important. We've got to develop that inside that team, and it does take time. So if we're going to normalize those honest conversations, what we've got, the biggest area we need to focus on is creating a pool of shared understanding. Now, when it comes to that honest conversation, how do we create a pool of shared understanding? Because this is key. If it's one way, then things can get messy because it's only one perspective. So let's have a look at how we can actually create a shared pool of understanding. Okay, so we must accept that we all see things differently. That's the key. Sometimes we can get blinded, or we can, in our own self, in the fact that this is the truth. And we sometimes may be missing pieces of the puzzle. So really key, we must accept we all see things differently. And your honest truth may not be my honest truth. So that's really key when it comes to creating a pool of shared understanding. Now, a pool of shared understanding in a situation where there's an honest conversation is we need to understand that people are more likely to accept an outcome when they feel heard, but they also understand where you're coming from. So you can't just allow them to feel heard by active listening and waiting. They also need to understand where you're coming from. So you need context to why we're having this honest conversation, and why it's important, and why your perspective, how you get to that perspective without taking too much time, without waffling. So that's really critical. So let's have a look at an ideal structure when it comes to when it comes to having an honest conversation. Okay, so we need to understand our intent first. That's important. Know your intent. Why are you having this? You need to understand that yourself. But then we need to open. And as I mentioned before, we need to keep this quick. So 1 to 2 sentences, create an opening. And I'll share with you shortly around how we can do that well. Provide the shared understanding, then explore possibilities, and then resolve whatever needs to be resolved. Do we need to address the behavior? Do we need to resolve the misunderstanding? Do we need to find a better way to do something? Whatever it could be. So let's have a look at how we open a conversation cleanly. So first of all, we need to request to talk, and then we need the subject line. And so the first part here is, it could be something like, is now a good time to talk? Are you open to talk right now? Okay, so it is something that is just a simple way to open. And over time, in a group or a company, you want to create sort of terminology or standard language. And that's really key because you want it to signal there is an honest conversation. Now, subject line is got to be short and sweet as well. So it could be something like, I want to talk about the merger, or I have a concern being raised about your behavior and I'd like to address it, etc. So just being really clear on what it is. And remember, the longer the preamble, the more awkward it feels. So we've got to keep it short and sweet. And my encouragement is to practice and get prepared around what you're going to say before you have that conversation, especially the opening. It's a critical moment to how you set up. Now, when we go to shared understanding, because that was the second component here, we want to look at three components: facts and observations. So here's what I saw, or here's what I have heard. Here is what I observed. So that there's the facts and observations. We need that first. The second part is, here is what I think, or this is what I feel. And then we need to invite a response or invite a reaction. So how do you see it? So give them an opportunity to share their facts and observations and their opinions and feelings. So that's really critical. So that creates that shared understanding. The more we understand about each other, the more likely people are to accept an outcome and be able to get to a resolution. Absolutely critical. Does anyone have any questions in regards to creating a shared pool of understanding and why that's really critical inside an honest conversation? Just pop a message in the chat if you have there. Are there situations where you can invite their opinion before giving yours? You first got to be able to, I mean, you could, but it's pretty important to be able to set context on why you may be opening an honest conversation. So I think that's really important in regards to it. Or you could after maybe facts. So there's another option, depending on what it is. If you've gone, okay, here's what I have seen. Can you share with me what happened there? Before you say maybe your opinions and feelings, you could do that. That's a really good way to bring in that shared understanding. I like that. It's good. Antonio, like your example of high-performing teams having open conversations frequently. Yeah, Antonio, I was part of, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I was part of a national record in New Zealand for unbeaten games in sport, 272 games over 16 years. And we went unbeaten, which is not only a New Zealand record, it could be a world record. We haven't found anyone with more at this point, but that was really clear inside that. And I've seen it in many top high-performing teams over a period of time. Once we have a conflicting meeting with client, we can have an internal meeting to have shared conversation. Yeah. Okay. So do you mean that there's a conflict with what the client is saying, or conflict within your own internal team in regards to how you? Okay. So conflict with the client. Yep. Sometimes you might want to sort of put a pause on a meeting, come back, discuss it, find out more information before you go back to them. Because especially if it gets heated, especially if you can feel there's no resolution anytime soon, just go, look, I think it's time to have a pause in this meeting. Let's go back to our respective teams. Let's recollect our thoughts and let's come back together next week or tomorrow or 1 hour, whatever it may be. That is also a really, really powerful way if it's starting to get heated, which is important. Okay, very good. Okay, now, as we know, emotions can get pretty high. And so I'm going to dive into, when it comes to conversations, there are 3 unhelpful behaviors. And I'll go quite fast through this, but I think it's important for you to get a bit of a feel on this. Okay, the first one is an unhelpful behavior is when someone avoids. They avoid responding, avoid actually having a conversation. The second one here is an attack. So someone might get really aggressive and attack in a situation of an honest conversation. And the third part is crumbling, when they literally just fall apart when you start having the conversation, or even you start to fall apart when you initiate the conversation or responding in the conversation. So let's have a look at how we can actually respond to these. So if we see avoidance behavior either in ourselves or the other person, let's have a look at if it's the other person. So possible responses: ask and stay silent, be persistent, call out deflections. And the mindset, think about your mindset here. I expect a lot more. And so you've then got to get to the heart of the matter. Why are they avoiding it? The second one here is an attack. If someone's attacking you, just stay really calm, breathe. Don't go into reactive mode. Just give some space, and then responsive mode. And use a late night DJ voice. That is where we go more credible. We slow down. We go a bit deeper tonality, and we can try and control the situation. If you go more approachability and really, really fast, you can escalate it. And so your mindset there is not to be easily intimidated. And in the third one, they crumble. You need to hold space, maintain neutral nonverbals, and be empathetic. And your mindset in this space should be, I can wait. So really important when you see these behaviors, when you're having an honest conversation. Now, when it comes to normalizing those honest conversations and managing them, number one, I don't have a slide for this, but you can maybe catch these. Be patient and start small when it comes to building out a culture of honest conversations. Be patient, start small. It will take time. A good way, number two, to begin this is a 1-minute debrief after meetings. Get someone to share what is one gem, one thing that went well. And number two, what is one area we can improve? So what is one opportunity? And it's a great way, if you rotate the person who gives the debrief after a meeting, to start building a level of honest conversations and it normalizing. And the third part is to separate the person from the problem. Now, the key way to do this is to avoid words such as you or why starting the sentence. You did this, or why did you do that? Because that puts people on the defensive. Then they get into attack mode. So we need to stay as something like, I have observed this. My recommendation is what I have noticed. This is how I feel. They're great ways to start and open those situations rather than going with, you did this and why did you do that?